Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event, Zoom in Education 2021. The event will be starting right now. Okay, so please note that closed captioning is available by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
Welcome, everyone. We're glad to see you all tonight. We strongly encourage you to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable. However, we are recording this event, so if you're not comfortable with being in the recording, then please keep your cameras off. And now to the start of this event, we would like to acknowledge, if we can just move to the next slide, please. We'd like to acknowledge that SFU's campuses and the servers being used to host this event today are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples. And particularly in the context of the Community Summit Towards Equity, it's important to recognize the roles of systemic and colonial injustices in creating further barriers towards equity. So although we are meeting in a virtual space today, I invite you all to reflect on your own position and relations to the land that you're personally joining from today, and the histories and the cultures of the original keepers of these lands. So I personally am joining from the core territories of the Coquitlam First Nation, and I'm extremely grateful to the host nations from whose lands I'm privileged to stand today.
I am personally joining this event from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. I am thankful to the host nations from whose land I am privileged to live and stand. As an educator, I've had the opportunities to learn more about the First Nations principles of learning from the BC curriculum for the process of decolonization. One of the principles states that learning is holistic, reflective, experiential, and relational, focused on connectedness, on reciprocal relationships, and a sense of place. I hope that this event helps to apply this principle to your learning experience, strengthening the community connectedness and engagement for the purpose of decolonization and indigenization. We have included a website called Whose Land, by which you can check which unceded territories you're at. Please be mindful of the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories that you reside in. You can also check the website by the message that is sent by our chat captain. Next slide, please.
All right, and now to introduce ourselves. So my name is Christina, and I'm a current undergraduate student at SFU. I'm one of the peer ambassadors with SFU Public Square, and I'm really looking forward to moderating today's event with Haven.
Hi everyone, my name is Haven. I'm an SFU alumna. My interest in community engagement has led me to join this team of peer ambassadors at SFU Public Square. As a professional working in the education sector and a former SFU student, I'm excited to be a part of this event focused on the students' current experiences and thoughts in the midst of this pandemic. Next slide, please.
So today we also have with us the other peer ambassadors who are hosting this event. So Gabrielle, Carrie, and Ali. Our role as peer ambassadors is to create connections with each other and across campuses and online this past year, gaining experiences in organizing student-centered events and working on projects that matter most to us through the platform of SFU Public Square.
Okay, now moving on to some housekeeping. Just a quick reminder again that our event is currently recorded. The breakout room sessions will not be recorded and remain confidential. Please rename yourself if your name on Zoom is inaccurate. There is also closed captioning available. Please click CC at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you need tech support, please send a private message to Carrie. Next slide, please.
And next, we would like to remind you all of the community guidelines of this event, just to make sure this is a comfortable, inclusive, and safe space for everybody who's joining us today. So you can review the community guidelines on the slide here, and they've also been sent to the Zoom chat. And we also have here today an active listener, so I'm really happy to be introducing Heather Lynn Ayres, who is a recent graduate starting her counseling practice called Intuitively You. She focuses on creating spaces where people feel seen and heard. So if at any time during today's event, you're feeling really overwhelmed or experiencing any emotional distress and you want to talk about it with someone, please feel free to privately message Heather Lynn and she will be really happy to have a one-on-one chat with you. So as some of you may have noticed, today's event is part of the SFU Public Square 2021 Community Summit, which is an annual opportunity for members of the SFU community and the broader community to come together and research, discuss, and take action on emerging and relevant issues. So the theme of the 2021 summit is towards equity, and it's going to be taking place online throughout the entire year. So it'll be focusing on better understanding the inequities that have been amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. And
she's gonna be a racist.
If we can all, thank you. Just make sure you're muted for now, please. And then, yeah, so amplified by, so the Towards Equity Community Summit will also focus on the solutions that will be needed to begin addressing the issues that have been, that we've really started noticing due to this pandemic.
Our event, Zooming in Education 2021, is deeply tied to the theme of our 2021 Community Summit. COVID-19 has changed how education looks to us, and the remote educational system, while it allows us to stay physically safe, has revealed many inequities and unfair policies. Meanwhile, there are uncertainties in how the in-person education, which will be starting from fall 2021, is going to be like. In order to not repeat the same errors, inequities, and unfairness, this event provides a space to the students to come together as a community and have a dialogue to come up with meaningful solutions that address the concerns. Christina?
So I'm going to now describe kind of what we'll be doing today during this event. So we will be having, first we'll have 2 speaker presentations, and those will be followed up by some breakout room discussions where we'll all get to kind of discuss some important questions. And then after the breakout rooms, we will, in the breakout rooms, we'll be sharing your concerns and thoughts about remote education and how this will kind of the interplay with the post-pandemic learning experience that will be coming up in a few months. And then you'll also be able to share your thoughts on what you think SFU could do to resolve the problems that students may have been experiencing throughout remote education and address any concerns and things like that. And then after the breakout room sessions, we will come back to this main room and do a quick debriefing, and then we'll have a speaker Q&A. And then at the very end, we will be announcing some door draw prize winners.
Yeah, to add on to what Krishna has shared, we will have $25 gift cards, 5 of them available for the door draw prize. You have to stay until the end of the event to win the prize.
And now, as a bit of a fun icebreaker, we have a couple of poll questions just so we can kind of get to know everybody kind of in this room today. So if Rachel, you can please launch the first poll. So the first question is, do you enjoy working or studying from home? And we have a couple options: yes, so, no. Or if you have any other answers, please feel free to put them in the chat and share them. The poll is anonymous though, so don't worry. All right, I see most answers coming in. And all right, so maybe we can share the results of the poll now. Thank you. So we're seeing about 35% enjoy working or studying from home, 54% so-so, 11% not really, no, and then a couple who have shared in the chat. Awesome, thank you. And Haben, for the second poll question.
Yeah, so now we'll be launching the second Zoom poll question. How do you feel about returning to in-person school or work in the coming months? And select all the apply because, yeah, we can have some mixed feelings about this, right? Okay, so I'm seeing some results coming in. Let's wait a little more. Okay, I think it's good for now. Yeah, can the results be shared? Yeah, so we're seeing that about 29% says amazing, 34% says I'm not sure, 47% said I'm scared, and let's see if some messages have been shared. Oh, okay, so one person says some courses work well remotely, fact-based, others that require interaction don't work as well. And then there's another, yeah, like I enjoy working from home. Yeah, in any hours before my younger siblings come home from school. Yeah, and I'm only worried about giving presentations without a script. Yeah, yeah, that's a bonus of the presentation on Zoom nowadays, right? That you can have a script in front of you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Okay, now and let's move on to the next part of the presentation. Next slide, please.
All right, so now I have the honor to introduce our speakers today. So we have Dr. Laba from the SFU School of Communication and two health peers at SFU, Aleisha and Mariel. So our first presentation will be by Dr. Laba, who teaches at the SFU School of Communication with a particular focus on applied communication for social issues. So much of his research has focused on teaching and learning in complex and dynamic communication and media environments. And today he'll be speaking on the various issues and controversies that he's encountered in his experiences teaching during this pandemic. Haben will explain the Q&A process just a bit.
Yeah, so throughout the speaker presentations, please post your questions to the Zoom chat if you have any. The speakers will not be addressing these questions during their presentations, but they'll be addressing them after the breakout room and debrief sessions. Okay, so I'll be passing my virtual mic to Dr. Laba. So could the screen sharing be canceled, please? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Dr. Laba, please feel free to go ahead and start your presentation.
Somehow I got muted, but I'm now unmuted. Everyone can hear me just fine. Good,
yes,
great, lots of head nodding. Thank you. I wanted to begin by actually acknowledging the extraordinary work done by the whole SFU Public Square initiative. All of you, I met the whole crowd just before we started. From Rachel to the extraordinary peer and ambassadors, to the supremely professional volunteers who are giving up their time and effort. And so I'm very pleased to be able to contribute to this event in some humble way. So not too humble, I hope. I want to begin with two accounts. One is a quotation, the other is a little bit of a narrative of an experience discussing remote teaching with teaching professors in a forum a few weeks ago. And these are going to be frameworks, and the building blocks of these frameworks is the quotation and the account of this discussion. And I think it gives direction and it gives substance and it gives a sense of purpose to everything that I want to say. And everything that I want to say, I'll warn you, is completely student-centered. I want to talk almost exclusively about student and student experience. So the quotation that I want to begin with is from the seminal work of the great educational philosopher and educator John Dewey, who wrote back in 1916 in Democracy and Education, quote, "Give students something to do, not something to learn," unquote. I love this quotation. Of course, what he meant was that our educational approaches have to set students into action. They need to break with traditional models of education and those models that are authoritarian, that are transactional, approaches driven by static content, by undynamic curricula, by teaching and learning that are encumbered by the bounded enclosures of the classroom, or teaching and learning that proceed by the medieval model of unidirectional and hierarchical transmission of information from a professor to a student. What we do at the university is absolutely medieval in its origins, and we continue with it. Dewey believed that learning results from action. Giving students something to do meant lessons and experiences that are relevant, resonant, that address real-world issues with real-world urgencies. What a concept of education. The traditional educational institution is not the sole authoritative site of educational activity, shockingly so. And teaching that stimulates, provokes, enlightens, imparts analytical acuity is also crucially at its core experiential. And I think this is one of the key lessons that I'm going to elaborate on from our experiment with remote. And the second point, so that's one part of the framework. The second part of the framework is a discussion I was having with a large group of teaching professors who were lamenting, bemoaning, whinging and moaning perhaps about the trials and tribulations, the travails of remote teaching. And their argument was that what makes it the most difficult, this will be interesting for students, I believe, is that students aren't self-directed. They don't know how to be self-directed, or they don't know how to be autonomous. I thought of two things when I heard this. One, that's not my experience at all. And two, if that's the case, whose fault is that? Certainly not the students. And so this theme of self-directed and autonomous, I think, is going to be key and critical as we look at the problems of remote and post-remote, post-pandemic. Imaginative and consequential teaching and learning are often a matter of overcoming the constraints of our very educational context, our very educational systems and approaches. The question for this forum is forward-thinking. It's future-facing. What lessons have we learned in the great experiment of remote, and where do we go from here? Is a return to normal merely, although comfortingly, a return to the same pre-pandemic modes and methods of teaching and learning? Is this moment in which we are contemplating and planning a return to the infinitely more organic and immediate face-to-face context of education also a moment in which we should work to revise and transform our teaching approaches? Is this not the opportunity? Is this a moment in which we get very serious about and fully committed to the concept that you hear a lot, student-centered teaching and learning? And through our course and curricular design and our teaching and learning environments, how do we enable students to become co-creators in their own learning? Have we learned lessons from remote that lead us to this achievement? Irrefutably, the pandemic and the move to remote delivery under forcible necessity, emergency in fact, worsened or exacerbated the existing problems and constraints already challenging pedagogical latitude, teaching latitude, and creativity. The transition to remote teaching and learning in the abbreviated time frame that it was accomplished meant that instructors needed to summon up their most creative teaching resources and apply, revise, experiment, reinvent pedagogies and pedagogical approaches. So clearly, instructors were not the only ones challenged. More challenged, in my mind, were students and our students. It's the present tense. We're still going on. Students, by necessity, were required to become extraordinarily accommodating. And students here know exactly what I'm referring to. as our entire educational enterprise needed to adapt on the fly. And the resulting stress on students has been substantial and well documented by education and mental health professionals. That's substantial. In its early phase, remote teaching involved retrofitting. As I've said before, often inelegant retrofitting of in-person courses for remote delivery. Of course, remote delivery courses were not, strictly speaking, online distance courses. Those courses are designed specifically for online delivery and teaching. The compelling evidence from surveys of national student organizations around the globe, certainly locally or nationally as well, but all around the globe, demonstrates that students have struggled mightily with the lack of richness, the lack of immediacy, the lack of a synchronous face-to-face teaching with, and they've experienced this with the awkwardness of and the exhaustion with remote platforms. Students are exhausted by it. I dare say that instructors are as well. The responses to and lessons around remote teaching in the pandemic have been overwhelmingly and understandably focused on technology and techniques of remote delivery. And neglected, I think supremely neglected, but definitely and equally important, however, are issues of educational philosophy and teaching practices that have come into high relief during the remote experiment, and that should inform and direct our educational priorities now and in the future. Simply stated, post-pandemic is a critical and particularly opportune moment for educational revision. This is a moment, this is a key and extraordinary moment. How do we activate students to be protagonists in their own education? And by extension, protagonists in their own civic life. How do we achieve ethicality? How do we achieve political engagement? How do we achieve civic fortitude as foundational priorities in our educational philosophies and practices? This is the moment to start thinking about them. If greater degrees of autonomy and skills of self-direction were critical for remote education and not universally achieved, these were not universally achieved by any means, how do we elaborate, expand, and sustain those values and practices? How do we democratize the notion of activism? It's not specialized, it should be every person, every day, and develop teaching and learning that's animated and motivated by social change. How do we address the urgencies and the qualities of face-to-face learning as technology, especially in the wake of the pandemic, becomes increasingly an article of educational faith? Each of these questions pivots on a key acknowledgement. If education must be constantly reimagined and revised, and if educational reform in the broadest sense can be understood as the core and as the driver of social change, then the pandemic has demonstrated that the project of the transformation of education has never been more urgent. That's what we've learned. It's never been more urgent. This should be a transformative moment. This will not be a case of visioning and implementing the already expansive and well-established universe of technological solutions, always technological solutions, applied at scale. While the virtues of online teaching have been comprehensively applied during the pandemic, educational resources and imagination are not simply a matter of technological capital or technologically enabled remote classes or worse, mega classes. The fact is that we can never dispense with the richness of synchronous, deeply interactive, participatory, and personalized face-to-face teaching, as well as the compellingly enduring concepts of and approaches to experiential learning and critical teaching. And by critical teaching, I mean teaching that addresses what is needed for students to become informed citizens, capable of participating in making public decisions that affect their larger world. The university at its core, at its essence, is a site of citizenship. Our models of education must move from knowledge in the abstract to knowledge in action, from knowledge that is not abstract actually, but rather derived from lived experience and active social engagement. Our teaching philosophies and our approaches need to be consequential and immediate. Our models for education have to move from standardized, conformity-inducing practices of educational delivery to open, malleable, problem-driven, agency-focused teaching approaches. Education that is not about transmission of information, but about individual and societal transformation. And once again, this is the moment. Education is a civic and a moral project. And as a site of citizenship, the mission of the university is nothing less than the progress of democratic society. What this means is that we need to educate in ways that students are autonomous and self-directed. Approaches that emphasize and achieve agency, collaboration, creativity, no matter what the discipline. And in fact, I'm going to emphasize especially these 3 points. Agency that I keep referring to is the sense that students have that they are empowered, that they have autonomy, that they are self-directed. Collaboration or sociality, key principle in our current experiment with remote, where students struggled mightily, as well they should, to be working in collaborative groups. And this is not just an educational value, this is a value that is precious and always expanding in terms of its importance and its consequence in professional environments. And creativity, especially creativity. I want to sum up, closing in on my time, with an observation made by Marshall Berman in a book called All That Is Solid Melts into Air. And Berman was struggling with the idea of what life is like in what he called the maelstrom, the storm, the upheaval of the modern world. And so he said, what is the experience of modernity? And one of the observations he made is as follows in the struggles to find ourselves at home in this upheaval. And certainly that's what we have now in these calamitous times. He said, quote, "We have mostly lost the art of putting ourselves in the picture, of recognizing ourselves as participants and protagonists of our own time." And it seems to me this is the most compelling idea, and again sums up the important moment that we're facing. Participants and protagonists in our own time. The art he referred to, the thought, the philosophy, the politics, the civic engagement, the social life, the cultural life, and especially the educational life. And what I think we need to understand through these principles, I hope principles and perspectives and points of view that I've put forward, is that all of this and this moment is the opportune moment, the key and critical moment for putting ourselves in the picture, of recognizing ourselves as protagonists in our own time, especially in our educational circumstances, which, when we understand the importance of education, is also the health, the progress, the well-being of democratic society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laba, for that very insightful presentation. I think some of the key things that I'm hearing from that presentation is really the necessity to help students kind of find their place within society, as well as kind of making them aware of things that are happening in the world right now that eventually after their education, or well, even during their education, they are a part of. And I think you really highlighted really well the end goals of education and why we're really here. And I think this is really important because you also mentioned how throughout the pandemic you've kind of noticed how students have been kind of struggling with remote education, which hasn't been really built to be remote. So I think it's really important to kind of achieve the goals of education in a supportive space and making SFU that supportive space and helping students do that from a place of well-being. So I think that connects really well with the Health Peers' next talk. So they're going to be sharing some of the resources that are available to students at SFU. So I'll allow Haben to introduce our health peers, but thank you again, Dr. Laba, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Next, we have Aleisha Fernandez and Mariel Olaguer. They are healthcare educators at SFU Health and Counseling Services. Aleisha is a student with a major in health sciences, and Mariel majors in behavioral neuroscience. They have important information to share with you on resources you can access right now and as you prepare for the return back to campus.
So hello, everyone. I feel like that was a tough act to follow. Thank you, Dr. Laba. So yes, me and Mariel are both health peer educators, and we're both so excited to be here and provide the student perspective to education, as well as provide some insight into how health and counseling services at SFU has been functioning due to COVID. Next slide. So yes, we kind of had a little introduction to share a little bit more about us. My name's Aleisha. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm in my final semester studying health sciences, and this is my third year with the health peer education program.
And my name is Mariel. I'm a second-year student in behavioral neuroscience, and this is my first year as a health peer.
So a little bit about what we're going to cover in our short little presentation. We're going to share a bit about the health peer education program and who we are, as well as what we've been up to during COVID and how SFU Health and Counseling Services has adapted to COVID. The health peers also ran a remote education poll to gather students' perspective on how to improve remote education, and we will be sharing the results of this poll with you. Next slide. So what is the health peer education program? So me and Mariel are both health peers, and we work together in a team of about 15 students. We work together to enhance student well-being and resilience at SFU through providing health information that's more accessible and also providing our own perspectives on how to live a healthy lifestyle. We also host events and collaborate with other student groups on campus. Next slide. So in light of COVID-19, with many students facing negative challenges as a result, SFU Health and Counseling has adapted all their services and also introduced new services on virtual platforms. For health peers, we have transitioned our original in-person outreaches to online platforms that has allowed us to reach a larger audience and spread awareness about various health-related topics. To accommodate those of different time zones and conflicting schedules, we try to incorporate a mix of asynchronous and synchronous events. So Mariel will share a bit more about what we've been up to.
So over the years, health and counseling has defined 4 areas of focus. 4 of them are sexual health, make space, which is just general well-being, active living, nutrition, and 2 new ones that we've added since last semester, international student health, and 1 focused on COVID-19. So I'm just going to go over what we've been doing the past 2 semesters. So for make space, every letter of space stands for something. So that would be social connection, physical activity, awareness, contribution, and emotional health. And we've been doing a lot of Instagram posts on how to incorporate these things into your daily life. And this semester we started doing an Instagram live series where one of the health peers interviews an SFU community member on one of these letters. For active living, we also do a lot of Instagram outreaches. We do a lot of holiday puns to motivate people during vacation. And we've done 2 blogs, one on how to work ergonomically from home, and a blog based on polls we received from Instagram, some responses on the barriers to fitness. And we also are working on a podcast on the relationship between exercise and mental health. As for nutrition, we also do a lot of Instagram stories. So we did one on the New Canada Food Guide, one on chocolate on Valentine's Day, and on good eating habits during quarantine. And since last semester, we've started producing podcasts. So some of them are navigating food around the holidays, eating habits during finals, processed sugars, and this semester we're working on body acceptance and eating disorders. And we've broken into the TikTok world with some snack attacks, which are just recipe ideas, and a grocery tour to help people learn how to do their own groceries. And last semester, we did a community kitchen with Embark over Zoom. So sexual health also does a lot of outreach for awareness on online dating, intimate partner violence, and period poverty and HIV, as well as a live consent panel over Zoom. So geared towards international students, we wanted to create a safe space for people to talk about mental health challenges. So we made a group called Chai Chats that met, once a month over Zoom where we could all talk about this. And we also have a Padlet area where you can share asynchronously and a blog to come soon. As for COVID-19, last semester, we were asked to compile some resources for students in isolation. So we made a self-isolation guide. It's 28 pages long with recipes, ideas to do for hobbies. And this semester, we are hosting drop-in sessions, which are pretty much like office hours for students who need to be in quarantine, have questions on public health guidelines, and game nights as well. We've done some one-off events. We've done 2 webinars, one for Thrive Week and one for World Mental Health Day. That one was on adulting and overcoming imposter syndrome, especially for first years who may feel very overwhelmed by this experience, and a de-stress time event with Global Connections program. So now I'm just going to go over some of the resources we offer at Health and Counseling. So we operate on a stepped care model, which is essentially just providing as many resources to the students as they need. So your first point of contact would be a live chat support or a drop-in Zoom with an access case manager, and they'll help you understand what your needs may be and what they can do to help you. You can also speak to a nurse on Wellness Wednesdays if you'd like. We have some asynchronous courses that you can take to learn about coping with anxiety and depression or resilience. We also have an app called My SSP, and you can access counselors for free anytime, anywhere, in any language, as well as a newsletter that comes out bi-weekly. We have some drop-in programs focused on social connection, like Meet, Greet, and Eat or the Creative Collective if you're into scrapbooking or bullet journaling, and some virtual supports that are tailored to some specific needs in our community, like Dungeons and Worry Dragons, which is for people who may be struggling with social anxiety and want to play games and socialize in a safe space.
So now I'll be sharing some of the recommendations from remote education that we gathered from our unofficial Instagram poll that we launched last summer. We also did a follow-up poll the next semester in fall, but we did have a low response rate. So we collated the responses for our remote education poll with some of the other SFU surveys that were happening at the same time to create recommendations from the student's perspective with a wellness lens for how to improve remote learning. And they are summarized in this blog that I just put into the chat. And I will now go through the 10 recommendations we made. So number 1 was explore hybrid models of teaching. We surprisingly found that many students did prefer synchronous learning. However, to make learning more accessible, we recommended providing asynchronous methods as well, such as recording lectures over Zoom that students can access and other alternatives. This will greatly benefit students who may not be able to watch class live due to different time zones or things that just pop up during a pandemic, as well as technical difficulties that may compromise the quality of learning. Number 2 was set clear expectations. Many students felt that there was less clarity with online learning, as instructors would often post rubrics and would not expand on assignments during recorded lectures. So we recommended ensuring that there's always a live Q&A period for students and additional office hours if possible. Next slide. So number 3 was increase availability. Students often report that office hours were inconvenient times for them and felt less sure about instructors' expectations. For in-person classes, students would ask questions during class, often swing by offices, which is something online classes doesn't offer. Many students also reported disconnect with professors, especially right now when more students are looking at grad school. Many are finding it difficult to make a relationship with instructors to get references for grad school. Number 4 was reduced workload. I know personally for me, taking exams and online quizzes has been stressful because besides the normal exam stress, I'm also worried about my power, my internet going out. So we recommend breaking up exams into smaller quizzes or doing assignments so there's more flexibility for when people can when people can send them in and also work on them. And they are more low stakes. Many students are also feeling burnt out much faster while studying from home. We recommend asking students for feedback on ways to relieve pressure on them while maintaining academic integrity. Next slide. So number 5 was take regular breaks. Zoom fatigue is a real phenomena that researchers are saying is becoming more common and is often a result of spending lots of time with our webcams on. We recommend providing the options for students to keep their webcams off and taking regular stretching and eye breaks during class. Also asking students how their energy levels are during class to see when might be the best time to take a break. Number 6 is provide alternatives to live participation. I know for me, when my internet cuts out, or I'm always worried about repeating something that someone else already said, or I might cut out when I'm saying something, or I just miss a really important point my professor said because I was trying to troubleshoot computer problems. Providing alternative ways to live participation helps relieve some of that stress and equalizes the playing field for those who are working under less than ideal conditions. These alternatives can also be really valuable. I know I really enjoyed interacting with my peers on discussion boards. The chat function on Zoom and office hours can also be a less intimidating way to get participation marks while remotely. Even providing an optional weekly assignment instead can be really helpful and make sure all students are meaningfully engaging with the material. Next slide. So number 7 is implement flexible deadlines. There is a lot of uncertainty right now. I know a few people who've had COVID scares, which can make it really hard to concentrate on school. I had a professor who had a deadline, but it had 2 days of flex time. And this really helps those students who may be juggling different time zones. They may be operating in one time zone, but doing school in another time zone and have troubles figuring out which time is what time in which time zone. Being open to extensions. This can be really comforting to students who are experiencing hardship, just knowing that they can get extensions easily from professors. Number 8 is encourage social interactions. Some students are isolated at home and they look forward to classes just to engage with people. It can also be hard to network and build connections with professors, like I mentioned earlier. We recommended you can use breakout rooms or the whiteboard function on Zoom, as well as the discussion boards on campus. Next slide. Number 9 is acknowledge students' input. Transitioning to remote learning is a new experience for both instructors and students. Many students want to share their feedback and insight, but may be worried that their feedback will not be heard or acknowledged or maybe reflected negatively on them. We recommend allowing students to anonymously provide input, such as through SurveyMonkey, web survey, other platforms. Number 10 is be yourself. My favorite memory of remote education was when my prof was teaching and then her dog started barking and then she brought her dog to the webcam and then everyone just started spamming the chat with pictures of their dog. It was just a really nice social, genuine moment. It can be easy to feel disconnected during remote learning. So those real, genuine moments of human connection can mean a lot to students. I know it really motivated me to keep coming to class. I had a professor who told us to just type an emoji in the chat to describe how we're feeling. And it was really nice to see what other people were feeling and if they were feeling the same way, and also to be acknowledged by our professors that our feelings matter to her. So that sums up our recommendations, and that also sums up our presentation. So we look forward to hearing your questions later. We also have some contact information and resources for health and counseling services. And we also have some guiding questions we want to leave you with.
Yeah, so I'll just be reading out these questions that you can consider for your breakout room discussions. So are there things that you agree or disagree with from our results? Is there anything else from remote education or work that could be applied to post-pandemic life? Is there a topic or outreach that you think health peers and HCS should be addressing? What would make it easier to navigate HCS resources? And what are your opinions and thoughts on virtual healthcare services continuing on in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mariel and Aleisha, for sharing your presentation with us. Yeah, it's great to learn about the services provided by healthcare educators and health and counseling services. And I'm also very inspired by all of these services and initiatives that healthcares have been taking. And in order to move forward to a healthy, effective, student-centered, and democratic education system, it is important for students to maintain and improve their health. So it's very helpful to learn from you about the services that are offered, as well as your suggestions for the future. And these suggestions such as, so I've written some notes on here, like hybrid learning, more synchronous activities, increasing availability, building relationships with professors, reducing workload, taking regular breaks, and giving alternatives of live participation, having flexible deadlines, encouraging social interactions, acknowledging student input, and providing opportunities to be yourself. They are all very helpful. And they also give everyone a good start as they move on to breakout room sessions to also discuss what they think about the changes that can be happening for right now, as well as the post-pandemic education system. Okay, now let's talk about the breakout room sessions. So yeah, as you see on the slide here, you'll have about 25 minutes, but this can be arranged as well depending on what we have. So it could be about 20 to 25 minutes, and each room will have a facilitator and note taker, and note taker will record the conversation without mentioning specific names. So do not worry about having your name be written in the note taker's notes. And you'll be discussing your thoughts and recommendations for SFU's return back to campus. And there are some more questions here, but these are the first guiding questions, which are, what are your current concerns in SFU's remote education? And what are your hopes about SFU students learning after the return back to campus? And your facilitator will also give you some more questions after you answer these questions. And there will be also a question that asks about what you consider about this, what the speakers have shared. And in that time, you'll be able to answer, if you want, the questions that have been given by Aleisha and Mariel. Any questions about the breakout room sessions before we send you off to the breakout rooms? Okay, so I'm seeing that all is good. Yeah, and then one more note is, yeah, so to protect your confidentiality, please only share what you feel comfortable sharing, and you will have about 20 to 25 minutes for the breakout room discussion. And again, if you would like to share your concerns with an active listener, please return to the main session and send a message to PSQ-Gabrielle. That's how she's named in this meeting. So she can send you to a breakout room that, so you can see her in that breakout room. And if you need closed captioning, do not join the breakout room when prompted and stay in the main session. After the breakout room sessions are over, a facilitator from each room will share a summary of what has been discussed. And I'll be passing my virtual mic to Christina.
All right, so now I'm going to ask Gabrielle to open up the breakout rooms, and we will see you all back in about 20 to 25 minutes. And again, if you need closed captioning, please do not click to join the breakout rooms. So you can stay in the main room, and we'll be having there will be a discussion taking place in the main room with closed captioning available. All right, so we will see you all back in at around 7:15, 7:20.
Okay, I believe everyone's here now. Yeah, welcome back. So hope you had great conversations in the breakout rooms, and we would love to hear back from you about what you shared. So facilitators have 2 minutes to share on the main takeaways from their discussion. So let's start from the breakout room 1. Mariam, could you share with us about what happened in your breakout room?
Yeah, for sure. So some of the things that were discussed was the, having synchronous versus asynchronous courses. So, recording live lectures so students could access them later. We were kind of discussing that because, it would kind of be nice for everyone to see it as it happens, kind of keeps students accountable. But then also, if anyone was unable to attend the lecture, they can always go back and watch it afterwards. And then we also discussed accessibility. I think a lot has changed with everything moving online, and sorry, a lot of like systems have changed, and hopefully they'll stay different. But not everyone has access to all the like laptops and microphones or whatever it may be that they need for virtual classes. So it's also something to consider that although some people might prefer online classes, it's not always available to everyone easily. And it's laptops are expensive, so I think just making sure that the format for each class is accessible for all students.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing the main takeaways from your room. Yeah. And now I'll move my virtual mic to Christina.
Awesome, thank you. So next we have Arna from room number 2. Would you please be able to unmute and share from your room?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. So the first thing we talked about was mostly problems and challenges that students are facing while studying online. So we talked about how everyone's facing Zoom fatigue and they're on classes all the time, especially when they have to turn cameras on during classes. They aren't very, a lot of students aren't very comfortable with doing that as well. Now they're at the point where no one turns the cameras on anymore, and everyone's not as not as into the classes as they were in the beginning of the semester. So the main point of this being that students have sort of lost their they tend to lose interest easily and concentration easily when studying online on Zoom or via any other form like recorded lectures. However, we did also talk about how recorded lectures are beneficial to some students, because if they aren't able to attend the live classes at one point, they can go back anytime during the weekends whenever they have time and just look at the lectures again if there's anything they don't understand. So that's been one thing that has been benefiting students a lot as well. Then we talked a little bit about how SFU can make it easier for students to come back to campus and transition back to learning in person. We talked about the concept of hybrid learning, how everything going back on campus right now would probably not be the best one for a lot of students, and students would prefer hybrid learning instead. Having some classes in person, some classes online, which don't have as much of a load, and also to have these classes recorded just in case someone can make it to class that day when it's in person, just having it recorded for them to watch it later, because everyone has their own commitments during the pandemic. A lot of students at SFU are international students as well, who probably will not be able to make it in time here, depending on when they get vaccinated. And we also talked a little bit about how we've started to think a lot about things that we did not used to really think about before. For example, the things we're touching, and how we're just coping with being around people, and how it's going to be a little hard for us to talk to people when we go back in person. And someone mentioned that they're going to be shy talking to their own friends and not recognizing their friends in a mask. So yeah, that's a couple of things we talked about, and then we ended off on a funny note. We just talked about each other's courses and what we're doing, and just general regular stuff. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you so much. Haven?
Yeah, thank you so much, Arnav, for sharing the main takeaways. And now, Rachel, could you share with us about what happened in your breakout room?
Yeah, so I guess, well, first of all, we acknowledge that there's definitely burnout amongst students, and there can be challenges with trying to engage students more. But on the flip side, there have been some benefits to this online learning environment. For one thing, there's more flexibility in terms of like scheduling. And it also provides, I guess, more opportunities to be able to tailor, I guess, your learning experience to your own learning style. For example, during online learning, you could be knitting during class, for example, or I guess doing something with your hands, right? If you're somebody who likes to do something with your hands while listening, that's something that's an opportunity that the online environment creates. It's also easier to get more involved in events as well, because you can just turn on your Zoom camera from the comfort of your home, which is really nice. So in terms of, I guess, different approaches and strategies, I guess our group felt that SFU could dedicate more resources to improving an online educational resources. So perhaps, for example, having a hybrid educational approach on the return to campus. So giving an option to attend classes in person for those who want that in-person interaction, but also live streaming component as well for those who perhaps are at home or perhaps even in a different country as well. There was also mention to, yes, resources are important, right? And being to build capacity, but also the need for a very human element, right? Empathy towards everyone and just compassion, remembering that everyone is going through very difficult circumstances during the pandemic. That includes both students, but also professors and faculty, people like that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing what has been discussed in your breakout room. Okay, now Christina.
All right, and last but not least, Inoka, would you please unmute and share what room 4 discussed?
Yes, thank you so much. Concerns that were expressed in our breakout room included some profs not being familiar with how to effectively teach online, putting too much accountability in students' ability with technology, the lack of engagement that students have with profs due to it being an online setting. And last but not least, if the instructor evaluations have been read and taken into account when the professors are teaching in future classes. Approaches and strategies that were shared included profs taking the time halfway in classes throughout the semester for students to share any struggles that they've been experiencing during the semester. And another strategy that was shared was having more compassion and understanding with transitioning back to campus, because everyone is dealing with their own struggles. So for people to hold that space, for people to express compassion and understanding, I think is very key in being able to make this transition as smooth as possible.
Awesome, thank you so much. And it looks like we will be moving into Q&A now. I'm definitely hearing a lot of overlap between what was discussed in the breakout rooms and kind of the insights that our speakers have been sharing today. So I think this is a really great place to transition into Q&A. I will pass it over to Haven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you for all of the sharing during the debrief session. And yeah, and then so now for this Q&A session, we would love to hear back from the speakers on what people are wondering about. So the first question that we have is for Dr. Laba. So on the chat, someone asked, could a live stream classroom with a professor and class students, remote students with a TA to run the tech and interface with remote students provide an environment that would give energy to the classroom and draw in remote students?
The answer is yes. Yes, it could be done. The question, of course, is, can it be done effectively? It necessarily requires, by the way, this came up in 1, 2, 3 of the summaries of the breakout rooms, that there's a sense that hybrid models will be a good answer. And I do agree. I do agree. Obviously, I made an impassioned plea for the quality and the continuation and the vitality and the immediacy and the necessity of face-to-face communication, face-to-face context of education. And I did that, and I argue that as a provocateur, not to denigrate or dismiss the possible technological solutions that can be offered, which is hybrid models. But it's to emphasize the fact that hybrid has to be balanced. I am concerned about the technology, those that are in charge of the technology. As you just noted, some of the views are that the solution is to have the TA manage the technology. Someone's got to manage the technology. It doesn't have to be onerous, but it's another layer of technology and cost that I think is well spent. In a commentary that began, I think it was Neil, and I responded to Neil wherever he is, about leveraging both the technologically mediated and face-to-face, and that isn't it a good thing for them to be combined, and can't we do that? And I believe that we can, and we probably should do it. It involves it's not so simple and straightforward at the same time, not just because of the technology, only because of the cost. And the cost is fine. I think the university should be, like governments, spending at the point where we return. They have to support that return to in-class learning. But in terms of synchronous and asynchronous, so I'm a strong believer in synchronous approaches to education. During the breakout rooms, I was having a conversation about my own course and the fact that I ran it. The last one I ran was synchronous, and students loved it. They didn't complain that they didn't have a rotten half-hour lecture of me, as a talking head that they could go to any time and then discuss it in detail with their TAs later. I decided not to do that, but the students endorsed the idea of synchronous, no matter where they were in the world. There weren't that many that were far afield, maybe 4. But they said it was great to have somewhere to go. Like, here was our class time. We were there. It was live and in person. It went on for a while. It's an inspiration for both students and instructor. This is not, again, an argument against asynchronous solutions or hybrid models. But I believe that when we come back, we're going to have to do it smartly and strategically, and that will necessarily involve, as many of you have discussed in the breakout rooms, 3 of the 4 mentioned hybrid, and the possibility of live streaming, so it's in-person and remote at the same time. There are some challenges with it, but it probably is the best way to proceed to cut the trauma.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Laba, for the detailed answer to the attendees' question. And on the chat, there is a message that has been posted by Tara Holland. So yeah, she says, posting this for later, I have a question for students, Dr. Laba, about recording synchronous class sessions. I use those sessions for interactive discussions or activities with lots of breakout room use. Recording those sessions does not capture the real use or learning, especially peer-to-peer learning that happens in them. Yeah, so Tara, would you like to ask that question and right now and elaborate on that?
Sure, thanks so much. Yeah, I totally agree with the hybrid thing, and I heard that too from, obviously it was a theme from many of the groups, as you said. And I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do that. So, Dr. Laba, I feel the exact same way as you about the way education should be, that it's a student-centered model and they should be taking ownership, and that's the way I have always taught. and have continued to do it remotely that way as well. But where I'm really struggling is taking that active learning, experiential learning mindset. You can do it in a synchronous remote session quite easily and quite well, I find. But then when you get into the recording it for future use, for students who can't come for whatever reason, all of that great learning that happens in those sessions is lost because you miss the breakout rooms, you miss, as I said in the chat, the peer-to-peer learning. So I don't know if there's a good answer to how to get around that. But I'd love to hear from you as well as students in the room to see what you think about this.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. I think that was really well articulated. It's exactly how I see the challenge and problem as well. There is this argument around the loss of immediacy. I referred to it a few times, the richness and immediacy of interaction that's synchronous, and that you are absolutely correct in my experience that you can't reproduce that in in something that's recorded and students go to after. There is something about that moment in being in class, and that there's simply no way, there's no substitute for it. And I think that that's something that is not an easy bridge to cross. The hybrid model is a bridge, obviously, and it's meant to do so. But there is no real answer, it seems to me, for that, for the quality, to gain the quality or maintain the quality and protect it and sustain it, the quality of interaction, the depth of that learning, the excitement of it. I regard the classroom, the university classroom, as the single most exciting context in the entire university. And I've learned that remote can simulate that. But again, I was of the mind that there is something lost here in the recording. But as long as someone isn't chronically absent, I suppose there's always resources that we have recorded or otherwise that help people catch up if they've been away. But it's a synchronous model, which demands that students are there. And it so happens that, my approach anyway was one where I said, it's going to be synchronous. You're going to have a place to go. Not everyone could make it every week. I did not record, nor did I have a request to record. But what I did do with this gain, and it's true that I think it was group number 3 that noticed that there was flexibility of remote, that there could be a level of engagement, though it was challenging. But what students did, and I was able to do, is connect with them remotely, individually, to talk to them about what they missed. But the model still remained predominantly and forcefully and decisively, and I think beneficially, synchronous. There may be other people here with other ideas, but I really appreciate your comment, Tara.
Thanks very much for your answer.
Thank you so much for that really interesting discussion. I think maybe if we can kind of try to look at the student perspective now, maybe I'm thinking if Mariel and Aleisha would like to kind of comment on how they feel as students and as health peers about how hybrid learning might help or not help students when we return to in-person classes.
I guess I can touch on that because Aleisha is going to graduate. But what I think of with this question is, I think back to my organic chemistry course I took in the summer, and what the professor did is he recorded his teaching lecture, and then we would show up for office hours, I think twice a week for an hour each. And then he would go over the things that he said, and we would do problems together. And I think it was a really good compromise that, because especially with chemistry, even if it's in person, it's easy to kind of lose focus. So I think it was beneficial that it was recorded and that you could look at it again or at the speed that you're comfortable. And I found the office hours really engaging and helpful. So same with like my physics course right now, we do synchronous learning and synchronous office hours, and that's all. I really like it, and I do feel more motivated when it's in person, like over Zoom.
Yeah, I can definitely add on to that. One thing about synchronous learning that I love is that it kind of gives me something to do and look forward and helps me plan my days because the days kind of just merge when you're in the same place all the time every day. So it just kind of gives me some structure too. Um, but I know that some people are having difficulties with internet and joining Zoom is difficult, which is why having recorded would be beneficial. It may impact people's attendance rate, but it could be so beneficial for those who are struggling with virtual methods. For in terms of in-person, yes, nothing replaces peer-to-peer learning. I miss just making a random friend in lecture. Hi, how are you doing? Can I borrow your notes if I miss class? Just talking about stuff during the break too, and making those friends and connections. And you really learn from your peers in those live sessions too. Um, I know that some lectures did have audio recordings, but it wasn't something that was available for all classes. So I feel like it could be a possibility. And I know the Center of Accessible Learning also gives devices to students that help them record lectures too, that they can always listen back to. So making that accessible to everyone could also increase accessibility for those who are unable to get those accommodations, because it can be a lengthy process to get those accommodations.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. And I'm also seeing in the chat, some people are commenting about using recorded lectures as like backups for people who maybe have fallen ill and can't attend lecture. And a lot of people having similar experiences using this model. I'm also seeing that someone has a prof who has been recording lectures and also including some of the some readings for participation and understanding. Yeah, so a lot of really interesting comments in the chat relating to that. Maybe Haben, would you like to go on with the next question? Or oh, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I didn't want to lose it. There's another comment in the chat from W. Cousins. I don't know if you caught it. It's just such a provocative question. I didn't want to miss it. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to post that question next.
Yeah, the question is, what kind of pushback do you envision from the old guard at SFU who want to maintain the status quo when it comes to traditional learning models? So here's my raw for SFU. I think it's probably hard to, one could excavate for the old guard and find someone who's resistant to traditional learning, resistant rather to new experiments in teaching and learning. But the excavation would be an arduous process because I regard SFU as innovative. It's always paid close attention to the quality and the experience of teaching and learning. And there will be those that want to maintain the status quo for sure. But the changes, to say changes in the air is an understatement. The revision that I advocated for and this notion of projects of change have to be ongoing. Curricula that is static is no curricula at all. It's not worth anything. If we remain static, if we remain tied to old modes and methods, we do that at our peril. And what's sacrificed is not just the quality of the experience for the students, but the very purpose and mission of the university that I argued here and have argued in other situations and occasions is one of social change. So I think that wouldn't be a formal pushback or a strong pushback. There will be those that maintain what they want to do. I can give you an analogy. I was one of the directors for the Canvas project that adopted Canvas from something, it's not that long ago, that was rotten and outdated called WebCT, which was the learning management system. It had its day, but we kept it longer than its day. So it was fossilized. It was a corpse hanging around, a technological corpse. But we maintained it until we had a solution. And I argued, along with others, but I vigorously argued for an open source approach, an open source solution. Learning management systems in traditional sense are tired. They don't support the kind of dynamic change that we need to pursue. And so the university bought into this, going open source and developing it ourselves and formulating it and designing it for SFU and specifically for needs at SFU that were particular. So I have nothing but a sense of hopefulness and optimism that there will always be those that clung on to WebCT but made the transition eventually because you're forced to. That I think most instructors, and certainly I can speak for my colleagues in communication, but across the university, I have interactions with so many people. And there is the strongest sense that this is a moment of change and transformation. And you will, and when we say old guard, I appreciate it. I know what you're referring to, but I want to emphasize that sometimes some of the older faculty members who've been around a long time are the most vigorous in their support for change and for shaking up the status quo. But it's a good question.
Yes, definitely. It's a really good question that helps for us to learn more context on how it is like at SFU in terms of responding to changes. Yeah. Now we have some questions we have a question for Mariel and Aleisha. So as people are heading back to the campus, what challenges are you expecting and what kinds of supports can be provided by health peers or health and counseling services at SFU to address these challenges?
So I guess I can take that question. So at SFU Health and Counseling Services, they're making plans right now and they're unsure about how things are going to proceed. They're as much in the dark as all the professors and other people that work at campus. But what we kind of envision, it would be kind of like a hybrid kind of version of what we do right now, especially since I am not anticipating that it'll be a complete transition into the fall. I feel like there will be a slow kind of transition. So providing supports like how to talk to people and how to make friends, how to increase social connection, all those kind of easing the concerns. Especially now we are doing COVID drop-ins, so people can ask questions related to COVID and have their concerns answered too. We're also creating more spaces to connect with students. I'm trying to address all those concerns that pop up. And as students, we are able to kind of see what we're anxious about, so we can also address those because we know that's what other students are feeling too. Yeah, Mariel, do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it all, that we're still in a moment of change and we're not sure what to expect, but hopefully a lot of our virtual supports will still be in place in the coming semester.
Yeah, thank you for giving us more information about what is in plan for the health peers as well as the health and counseling services for the post-pandemic education. Yeah, and Christina?
Yeah, I'm actually just seeing a lot of interesting discussion in the chat. It really relates to what you brought up, Aleisha. I see someone who's talking about how we're all just trying to get through this difficult time. And I know This phrase, this difficult time, is used a lot, but I think it's really important to recognize that we're all just dealing with new things, and we're trying to do our best and plan for the best that can best serve both SFU staff, faculty, and students, all, whether that be in their education or as well as kind of the supports available to them in terms of health and counseling. So I'm seeing another question for the health peers. So wondering where students can find more information about like the remote counseling services or kind of the resources that are available to them. I know you kind of touched on them a bit earlier, but maybe you can talk a bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, sorry if I can just, so that was my question, and I knew about the remote counseling services and the app. I forget the acronym for that, but all those other the great things that you were talking about, the live Instagram things and all those cool initiatives, I had no idea they were going on. So I wonder, I mean, if students know about them or how they find out.
So I can touch on that first. Yeah, honestly, I do hope that students get to know more about what we do. I think our Instagram account is not very well known, but we have a good following. A lot of the virtual programs are listed on the website, like the Dungeons and Worry Dragons. And I think currently Health and Counseling is reviewing like feedback from students about the layout of the website and how accessible the resources are. So hopefully in the future, maybe the website will be restructured to like have information more easily viewable by students, and that like the work of the health peers will be more like visible to the student community.
It's really hard to promote online. We post on the SFU Facebook groups as much as possible. We have our own social media. We are partnered with Student Central to do our Instagram live sessions with SFU Student Central. When we were back in person, we had those tabling events, so it's much easier to reach students who may not be on social media. These days, social media is kind of like the main platform that students are, we're able to reach students.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing those resources with everybody. I'll pass it back to Haben.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. And thank you again to Mariel and Aleisha for sharing with us about how these are getting promoted. And yeah, so for Dr. Laba, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Before that, I just wanted to highlight going through the chat. It's always a challenge. You want to listen and read at the same time. But I just wanted, Tara already offered her support for Brianna's comment in the chat. And I just thought Brianna's comment was important to highlight about professors also going through extraordinary stress. It really is true that so many professors are completely dedicated to the advancement and the well-being of their students, and they try their damnedest. And as I said in my talk, they in an emergency, emergency situation, they had to scramble and find all of their creative resources and their disciplinary resources and their intellectual resources to make the pivot, to make the transition on the fly. And it was, you know, in many cases, I think that was heroic, and they accomplished a lot, but the stresses are also stresses. And I know that students understand this at their core, that the stresses are also in their instructors and their professors. But the advice that Brianna offers is good, and that is, we have to try our best to be considerate of one another. I think it's a good message for all of us. I appreciated that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Laba. So the last question that we have is for Dr. Laba. Could you give us an example of a specific project that your students did that represents student-centered and democratic learning?
Sorry, the last part was?
So I'll repeat again. Could you give us an example of a specific project or homework, assignment, or anything, any activity in your class that your students did that represents a student-centered and democratic learning process? Mm-hmm.
Sure. My fourth year class is called Applied Communication for Social Issues, where students research, design, produce, and then carry out media and communication campaigns around urgent and critical social issues. So it's a brilliant project just by definition. It's a great way for students to spend their time. But it demanded that they get out of the classroom and start thinking seriously about the projects of experiential learning, community-based learning, and projects that were, as we say, real world projects with real world urgencies. So they had to collaborate. So they had to form project groups, and they formed them in ways that was a very considered and lengthy project where they were able to express their interests and inclinations for what they want to do. And I said, you've got the entire semester to solve one problem, albeit an extraordinarily complex problem and a challenging problem, but a problem that I think would be addressed well by a dedicated collaborative group. And we did this, obviously there's an in-person, but I've taught it remotely as well. And students from distances connected and carried out and conducted projects and created the most amazing and compelling media, and the media was all interventions for social change. So it doesn't get better. The whole point about communication from my disciplinary point of view, but I would say it's for all disciplines, is this project of social change. If that's not our aspiration, I'm not sure why we're here. It did critical learning. I could explain where it comes from, but there's no time and it doesn't matter at this point anyway. But the work of Paulo Freire comes to mind, this work of John Dewey and Henry Giroux and many others. Anyway, it's a well-informed area where you say what we have to do is have students work on real-world projects and understand the relationship between knowledge in the abstract and knowledge as action. So that is the example that I can give. And they produced campaigns around transportation and health, public health, around urban development, around community and community development, senses of belonging, alienation, HIV/AIDS prevention and intervention, racism around COVID, Black Lives Matter. It goes on and on, but they weren't theoretical, critical papers that they produced. They had to spend half the semester doing the foundation research, and then the second half putting all of their creative resources to work to actually produce campaigns and messages, and they went out. They had impact, they had consequence, and they were powerful and they were decisive. And students left the university after that course thinking, "Wow, I've done a project of social change, and I've also have a leg up in terms of advancement toward my career aspirations," which I think is an important point to remember as well. So there's an example. I hope that's useful.
Yes, definitely it is. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It gives us a picture of how the education could look like, heading on to post-pandemic world. Okay, so Cassandra, could you share the screen for us? And we'll be moving on to the next part of the event to close. Yes, okay. So your comments, shared comments are very, very important to us. We'll be communicating them with the stakeholders who can create some changes for the current education system at SFU.
And now is the time for our door draw prize. So we have 5 lucky winners among all of you who have stayed with us throughout this evening. Thank you so much for attending again. So you will win a $25 gift card to your choice of Massey Books, Uber Eats, Hives for Humanity, or East Van Roasters. And then we also have a survey that we would like you all to fill out about this event. So you can expect an email from us with the link to that survey, and we'll be also having a prize draw for 3 additional $25 gift cards to the same choices for those who complete the survey. It'll be open for the next week. So now to announce our 5 lucky winners. I apologize if I pronounce your names incorrectly. Winner number 1, Aya Olaguer. Congratulations. Winner number 2, Harpreet. Number 3, Josie Yeager. Number 4, Jingjun Tian. And number 5, Jamila Chalawala. So congratulations to our winners.
Yay.
So you will be receiving more information from us later about how to redeem your prizes. All right, if we can get slide 12 back up, please. So this brings us to the end of our event tonight, Zooming in Education in 2021. If you enjoyed our event today and might be interested in other community engagement events, please feel free to check out SFU Public Square's social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. They're posted on the slide here, and they're also posted in the chat. Please stay tuned for our next upcoming event in the Towards Equity Community Summit, which is Innovations in Research, which is coming up in about 2 weeks on April 13th at 6:30 p.m. Where, so this is a virtual gathering. This year, it will be hosted on a platform, Gather, which is kind of like a video game platform, so it'll be super interesting. So you'll have the chance to discuss with faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community partners on various innovative projects related to the topic of equity. And I will hand it over to Haben to close this up for tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so next slide, please. Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming to our event. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you so much to all the Public Square staff members who have helped us plan and facilitate this event. And thank you so much also to other peer ambassadors, Gabrielle, Carrie, and Ali. Yeah, thank you so much.